I just saw the other day in connection with Ukraine, and it seemed to be some sort of speculative comment on the part of the South Koreans, but they claim they saw the North Koreans loading 10,000 boxes of armaments to ship to the Russians. The North Koreans are now shipping weapons to the Russians. I don't know if you saw that, or you can comment on that before we start about these talk about these relative peace proposals or summit proposals.
I've been tracking that myself really for most of this year. It's been ongoing here and there, but there have been some surge periods where there are significant, and we're talking those massive containers. It's not just, a box of something, but these massive, that you see on the back of 18-wheeler kinds of containers. And there is suggested that there could be as many as 2 million artillery shells in the last 12 months has gone from North Korea to Russia, and that's on top of the approximate 3 to 4 million that Russia makes domestically. So it is a massive, massive increase in armament.
So my conclusion is, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my position relative to North Korea is it wouldn't be there or wouldn't be a thorn in everybody's side if China weren't behind them. They basically support them. It's a poor country. They can't even keep their lights on. Their people are generally starving. They live in terrible conditions, and yet look, they're able to manufacture millions of artillery shells to fund to help support the Russians. What's the connection that we need to be looking at on that, Daniel?
Yeah, there's a couple of things at play here that almost seem contradictory. On the one hand, despite what most people think, and certainly a lot in the Western media fan this up, North Korea and China are not the tongue-in-cheek that sometimes they say in public. There's actually a lot of animosity between the two going back history, like a long time. And they're not at all, the North Koreans are not at all a client state of China to their demise. It's like a thorn in their side and a sore tooth. But at the same time, there is value in China to have them as a foil against, American interests. And so that they do play for their mutual benefit. But it's not quite as close, but it still isn't good for our side.
No, it's not, and I've always been kind of joking that sort of it's Xi Jinping will occasionally prod whatever North Korean leader happens to be there at the time and tell them, yeah, start launching some missiles. So you're saying North Korea acts independently of China, but China gets a big benefit because they act as the distraction that they always seem to be.
That's correct.
Fair enough. All right. Pivoting over to the situation, are we going to see some sort of peace resolution, some negotiated settlement? Because the carnage continues, and through the fog of war, I've been, asking my listeners out loud, can somebody tell me how many people have died in this conflict? And the answer, of course, is no. Depends on who you talk to, how many people died, who's winning, who's losing, who's advancing, who's not. This is what we've been talking about now for a couple of years. But insofar as a solution, we have, I suppose, some sort of proposal from Putin and also a summit proposal from Ukraine. Can you explain this?
I can, yeah. And both of them are not serious peace plans at all at the moment. Generally speaking, in war, and this goes back centuries, you don't get a negotiated settlement until both sides recognize that there's no path to a political victory through military means, that they can't achieve their war aims. And they have to both recognize that for you to get into some negotiated settlement. And we're clearly not there yet. Russia, I think, thinks, and for some good reason, that they have the military capacity that eventually, over time, they may be able to win that side. The Western side, the Ukraine side, also still has this belief that somehow later on, if they get enough stuff, they're going to change the dynamic on the battlefield back in their favor. I see no evidence of that, but politically, you had Putin on, I think it was Thursday of last week, come out with this plan where he basically said, if you'll surrender all 4 of the oblasts that we illegally annexed, they didn't say illegally, but it was illegally, then we will and withdraw your forces from there. We'll stop right there. We'll have a permanent end to the war, not just a ceasefire. The war can be over then, and you're neutral. That was the key thing. Interestingly enough, that's not too much dissimilar from what they were saying in April of 2022. But that's what he would now. Nobody's going to be able to say, yes, we have troops in these areas and we're just going to walk away. So it wasn't really a serious offer. Putin, I don't think, had any influences or beliefs that they were going to do it. On the other side, you have something equally unrealistic, is that Ukraine held this Switzerland peace summit that did not invite Russia, that did not include China, Brazil, and several others. And then India, when they showed up, didn't agree to this to the communique, which basically said they want Russia to surrender and they want Russia to withdraw, et cetera, and move out. And of course, that's never going to happen when they're in the military advantage point. So neither one of these had any relation to actual peace. And until both sides finally recognize the need for it, it's going to keep fighting.
Well, I suppose in all negotiations, you always ask for as much as humanly possible because you
That is right.
negotiate backward from that. So let's say both of these unrealistic expectation proposals, we take them for what they are, as unrealistic, and then you work together. You whittle away, or you maybe offer a concession, the other side offer a concession. It's a typical negotiation. Do you see that process continuing as a normal negotiation might, or is this just a waste of time?
I see that as a potential position that for the sides to take. And if the sides took that, if the U.S. and on our side and Moscow on their side actually said, all right, we're at that point to where we realize this cannot be won in an amount of time that's feasible at a cost that's feasible. So let's get this done, negotiated. If that were the case, then there would be some reason for optimism because both of them could have this maximalist position going in, understanding they're going to have to back away until they come up with something in the middle that they can both live with because no one's going to be happy. But so far, at least on the Western side, according to the comments that have been made out of Washington and out of Brussels, we aren't on that position. We're still, at least with this, it seems fantasy to me that think that even though we're on the really the big disadvantage militarily, our side keeps talking as though it's the opposite, and they're not talking about a negotiated settlement. They're just talking about no, we're going to keep going to the 1991 borders, as John Kirby said on the 7th of June.
Well, and I suppose a big concern is that we end up get drawn into something larger. That I mean, it's now starting to sound like the early years of Vietnam. We've got boots on the ground in terms of our military advisors explaining these advanced weapon systems and basically doing everything except pressing the button to launch them because it involves a level of sophistication and security clearance that the Ukrainians don't have. So that puts us actually in a position where we are fighting a war with Russia. Are you worried about this escalating? Because I don't think Russia wants to get in war with the United States or or NATO generally. They couldn't win that conflict. They know it. But if you throw China into the equation, if you throw some of the other powers that seem to be gelling together, the Iranians and going back to the North Koreans, anybody who hates America might be more than willing to join a coalition against us.
Man, that was like a mini masterclass. You just knocked it out of the park, talking on all of those issues right there. And one of the biggest consequences of our actions so far has been to, instead of weakening Russia, we have strengthened them both militarily and politically,
Yeah.
diplomatically, because it's Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. All of them have been coming much, much closer together, and especially with China or North Korea, Iran and Russia, directly military help. There's almost as much stuff coming to Russia from Iran as you described coming from North Korea earlier, and that's definitely not good for our side. And another reason why we need to get some kind of negotiated settlement to get this off the table now, so there isn't a risk of escalation. And yes, your concerns are very valid about the possible escalation.
Well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't, mention or run by you and offer a quick opinion, or I ask for a quick opinion from you. Does do the Russian Navy and their submarines being down in the Cuba area have anything to do with this at all?
That's a demonstration only. It's not any actual threat. The only way that poses a threat is if the war goes nuclear. Then it's a real risk, especially that nuclear powered sub, because just like our nuclear powered sub, it's really, really difficult to track once they go underwater. And if things, if all hell breaks loose and a nuclear weapon could be launched from there, it'd be bad, beyond catastrophic.
So you don't see a Cuban Missile Crisis thing unfolding, at least
Not
right
at the
now.
moment. Not at the moment. It's just things continue right now. Things are staying on the conventional side and it's staying in the diplomatic realm. And we need to get them off the table so it doesn't get to that point.